Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Erica Brinker, Chief Marketing Officer of Nasdaq-listed Array Technologies, to discuss how newly public companies can navigate the process of reporting their ESG progress and the role of the utility-scale solar industry and how it can play in getting us closer to net zero emissions and ultimately combating climate change. Erica, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
Array is about to release its first ESG report. What has that process been like, and why is it so important for newly public companies to be thinking about their ESG goals?
Yes, so since we went public a little over a year ago, being public, we felt like the next step was being able to provide that greater transparency, the accountability, not just to customers, but our employees and also, of course, our shareholders. The ESG process and putting together the report really gave us the opportunity to look in the mirror, examine our processes, and what do we aspire to be. So part of it was putting the information out there, but then the second part is, how do we start to develop goals around that as well? As a global company, we want to make sure that we are continually improving. We're looking at things like our water consumption, how we're attracting talent, making sure that we have an inclusive and diverse slate of candidates when we're interviewing. So for us, it really is in some ways a way to provide and share our mission as a utility scale solar company. But beyond the IPO, we really just felt like this is the next first step for a company of our size and for one that's now listed on the Nasdaq.
As companies think about how to measure and manage their environmental impact, what are some best practices that you can recommend, given that Array just went through this exercise?
Well, it's a work in progress. It's not perfect. We're continuing to examine the ways that we look at the business from top to bottom. And by the way, there's a lot of different measurements out there, and standardization still continues to be a massive challenge because there are so many measurements that different stakeholders are looking at. But you want to look at some of the basics around emissions. You want to think about impacts to climate change, like you mentioned, the net zero, because we want to contribute to having a more sustainable, healthier planet. I think it's also really important to look beyond just your own four walls. Are you looking at your suppliers and your vendors who are bringing materials to you? For us, we have put together a supplier agreement that really makes sure that we're keeping our supply chain as clean as possible, so that we're using recyclable steel, for example, or vendors that are committed to carbon neutrality. And so those are really some of the things that we look at as we're trying to examine and vet partners in our entire supply chain as well.
Array is a major player in the utility scale solar industry. What role can utility scale solar plays? And what does it get us closer to net zero emissions and ultimately combating climate change?
Well, we always say in ESG, we kind of have a big E in ESG for environment, because for us being founded 30 years ago with that vision of bringing clean, sustainable power, it's important for us to not only highlight our own operations, but also how can we help other companies become net zero as well. And so we believe more strongly than ever that solar, utility scale solar in particular, is the best strategy for combating the serious issues that are facing our planet. We want to make sure that we're supportive of the Biden goals that they've put out there for clean and sustainable energy as well. And so to reach 45% solar by 2050, there has to be a massive investment in utility scale solar, and not only by the government, but also the private sector. And we don't want to see solar as being tied to any election outcome or one piece of legislation, because we see it as kind of ubiquitous to making sure that the right clean energy scales, because there's a lot that needs to be done well beyond just a piece of legislation. And so what we hope is that not only do we have this solar backed proclamation, but it's backed with the right regulatory environment and supporting incentives so that other companies are incentivized to use more utility scale solar.
Right, that's a great point that you make. And since its founding 30 years ago, Array has been an innovator in solar and driving force of the solar energy revolution. What plans does the company have to drive innovation in the years ahead, particularly as it relates to that ESG equation?
So for us, of course, we're huge fans of solar, but having that right mix of sustainable energy sources is incredibly important. And innovation has been at the heart of what we do since we were founded 30 years ago. I think for us, though, the differentiator from a product perspective is that we really focus on providing our customers the lowest cost of ownership. So you don't have a lot of breakage out in the fields, or we want our customers to have minimal maintenance. We want solar to continue to be viewed as we see it, which is the lowest maintenance and fastest to come online for energy production. So we want to make sure that we're committed to showcasing what we already know about solar and the reason that it's growing so fast around the world. We did just establish an Array Technology Research Center. It's dedicated to developing and field testing the latest and greatest solar tracker technology. And we do believe that we will continue to thrive and drive new innovation within solar and perhaps beyond. And as a proof point to that, we did just announce our recent acquisition of STI Norland, a Spanish-based utility-scale solar tracker company. And we think this is just a great coming together of cultures and of companies that are like-minded, that really care about climate change and really care about bringing clean energy to the world.
All right, Erica, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you so much.